Peace without blood all over the sand, and you see what's happening. In fact, a point that they didn't report, I've been, I guess, 3 or 4 maybe now, Nobel Peace Prizes. Can you believe it? 4, 3.
To be clear, Donald Trump has not won 3 or 4 Nobel Prizes. He's won 0. He later clarified that he was referring to his nominations. But can you imagine the reaction if Joe Biden came out and suggested he had won 3 or 4 Nobel Peace Prizes? And that's just one of the bizarre, outright false lines from the president's rants yesterday at his packed super spreader rally in Florida. It gets worse.
I'm not going to say the best, but I'm just about the best thing that ever happened to Puerto Rico. You better vote for me, Puerto Rico. You better vote for me. But I'll always be fighting for Puerto Rico. It's very unfair the way they were treated by Democrats.
He's demanding that the people of Puerto Rico vote for him. None of the 3 million Americans who live on the island can vote in a US presidential election. How can the President of the United States not know this? And he had a few more suggestions.
I went through it. Now they say I'm immune. I feel so powerful. I'll walk into that audience. I'll walk in there. I'll kiss everyone in that audience. I'll kiss the guys and the beautiful women and everybody. I'll just give you a big fat kiss.
That's not just gross and unsafe, but it's not funny at all, given he's been accused of sexual harassment and assault by multiple women. Another Trump scandal we just gloss over. And yet he was back at it again this morning, retweeting a barrage of posts from anti-Muslim bigot Bridget Gabriel, whose organization has been dubbed a hate group. Gabriel is someone who says Muslims like me can't be loyal citizens of the United States, and yet the president just retweets her nonsense again and again. It's never ending. Even Republican Senator Mitt Romney called out the president's rhetoric today. But Romney had to do both sides, just to be fair, tweeting that the president is out of control, but so is Keith Olbermann. Last time I checked, Keith Olbermann is not the Democratic presidential nominee. It's beyond ridiculous. So how did we get here? The normalization of presidential nonsense, the both sidesism, not just from Romney, but from large parts of our media. And what can be done about it? Here to talk about it is a man who's been a vocal critic of both Trump and the media's coverage of Trump, NYU journalism professor Jay Rosen. Jay, thanks for joining us. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good a job do you think the US media does of covering Donald Trump's bizarre, dishonest, bigoted, anti-democratic rhetoric and behavior?
Well, we'd have to divide the question. On investigating Donald Trump and revealing things that he would rather have hidden, I think the press has done a pretty okay job. In its day-to-day normal coverage, it's done a very poor job of reflecting some of the bizarreness that you pointed out here. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that, which we can go into. One of them is that routines in political journalism are built on assumptions about how presidents will behave. Trump simply doesn't cohere with those assumptions, and therefore the practices that are built on top of them collapse. Another problem is that to describe what he's doing sounds like an attack, and that kind of violates the principles of fair-minded reporting. Also, if you just take a transcript of his words, what he said, and print it at your website, that too sounds like you're being unfair, like you're attacking the man for simply reflecting what he actually said. And so these are some of the strange reasons why just reporting on Donald Trump seems like too much. And there's this subtle sort of unconscious pressure to clean it up, make it look better, make it sound more reasonable, make it sound more normal.
Clean up. Is it also the case, Jay, that the media just can't cope with Trump, the volume of stuff that he produces, that he fills the zone, to quote Steve Bannon, with so much excrement, shall we say? He does so much awful and outrageous stuff on a daily basis that it's just not possible to cover it all. It's just not possible to stay outraged by it all. We get numb to it.
Yes, another way to say it would be that he's hacked the newsworthiness formula. He says so many things that are newsworthy under the old rules that you have 15 stories a day about him just by listening to him talk. But I think more and more people are realizing that this kind of over stimulation of the news system is itself a method of propaganda. That's what Steve Bannon was getting at when he said flooding the zone with crap. It's a method. It's a political method. We know a lot about it from the Russian situation. In Russian setting, it's called the fire hose of falsehood, where you just put out so many false things mixed in with a few true ones, and you do it on every channel nonstop in a kind of flood. And the purpose of doing it is not to persuade citizens; it's to overwhelm them and also to dismay them and to drive them from the public sphere. That's the purpose of this overload. So flooding in the zone is kind of a disabling action. It tries to push people out of the public arena.
We're in the midst, Jay, of a very tight election campaign, of course. Have journalists, have campaign reporters, have producers and editors learned any lessons from 2016? And if so, which ones?
Well, I think they're very on guard against calling the race prematurely. I think they're very suspicious of the polls. They obviously don't want to be embarrassed the way they were in 2016. They're a little bit more attentive to Facebook and social media, but they're presented with novel situations, like a president who's trying to tear down legitimacy of the election, like a speaker, President Trump, the most potent speaker in the country, who's also the biggest force for misinforming the American public. I've tried to write about this by saying that there's no emergency switch in political journalism. You can't change the rules over to reflect the gravity of the situation that we face from now into November. And so by trying to go and cover this election with the tools that you might use in a normal election, that's not going to work.
Yes.
And yet, even though our political journalists know that, they haven't really been able to push the emergency button and come up with a different approach.
What would you be doing differently? One last question, Jay. What would you be doing differently if you were running a newsroom trying to cover this president, this election race?
Well, this is the way I put it. You can't keep from getting sucked into Trump's agenda without an agenda of your own. So you have to know what you're trying to defend. You have to stand in defense of democratic institutions. You have to stand up for the right for everyone to participate. You have to stand for a political system that respects the citizens' sovereignty. And journalists would prefer a world in which two normal candidates competed in a sort of normal way, and the legitimacy of the system itself was not an issue. But here you have a bad actor who's actually trying to tear down the central ritual in American democracy, and that forces journalists into a different role where they have to defend these things. But they're not used to that. They're used to just reporting the news.
Jay Rosen, thank you so much for being here.